It is always wonderful to be here with you guys, and I want to thank you again for showing up on Monday with me as a community. I love our community, and I love that we're doing this together. I will go ahead and share my screen, and we are on Course in Miracles, Chapter 4, Love Without Conflict. It is hard to understand what the kingdom of heaven is within you really means. This is because it is not understandable to the ego, which interprets it as if something outside is inside. And this does not mean anything. The word within is unnecessary. The kingdom of heaven is you. What else but you did the Creator create? And what else but you is his kingdom? This is the whole message of the At-One-ment, a message which in its totality transcends the sum of its parts. You too have a kingdom that your spirit created. It has not ceased to create because of the ego's illusions. Your creations are no more fatherless than you are. Your ego and your spirit will never be co-creators, but your spirit and your creator will always be. Be confident that your creations are as safe as you are. The kingdom is perfectly united and perfectly protected, and the ego will not prevail against it. Amen. This is written in the form of a prayer because it's useful in moments of temptation. It is a declaration of independence. You will find it very helpful if you understand it fully. The reason you need my help is because you have denied your own guide and therefore need guidance. My role is to separate the true from the false, so truth can break through the barriers the ego has set up and can shine into your mind. Against our united strength, the ego cannot prevail. It is surely apparent by now why the ego regards spirit as its enemy. The ego arose from the separation, and its continued existence depends on your continuing belief in the separation. The ego must offer you some sort of reward for maintaining this belief. All it can offer is a sense of temporary existence, which begins with its own beginning and ends with its own ending. It tells you this life is your existence because it is its own. Against this sense of temporary existence, Spirit offers you the knowledge of permanence and unshakable being. No one who has experienced the revelation of this can ever fully believe in the ego again. How can its meager offering to you prevail against the glorious gift of God? You who identify with your ego cannot believe God loves you. You do not love what you made, and what you made does not love you. Being made out of the denial of the Father, the ego has no allegiance to its maker. You cannot conceive of the real relationship that exists between God and his creations because of your hatred for the self you made. You project onto the ego the decision to separate, and this conflicts with the love you feel for the ego because you made it. No love in this world is without this ambivalence. And since no ego has experienced love without ambivalence, the concept is beyond its understanding. Love will enter immediately into any mind that truly wants it, but it must want it truly. This means that it wants it without ambivalence. And this kind of wanting is wholly without the ego's drive to get. There is a kind of experience so different from anything the ego can offer that you will never want to cover or hide it again. It is necessary to repeat that your belief in darkness and hiding is why the light cannot enter. The Bible gives many references to the immeasurable gifts, which are for you, but for which you must ask. This is not a condition as the ego sets conditions. It is the glorious condition of what you are. No force except your own will is strong enough or worthy enough to guide you. In this, you are as free as God and must remain so forever. Let us ask the Father in my name to keep you mindful of his love for you and yours for him. He has never failed to answer this request because it asks only for what he has already willed. Those who call truly are always answered. Thou shalt have no other gods before him, because there are none. It has never really entered your mind to give up every idea you ever had that opposes knowledge. You retain thousands of little scraps of fear that prevent the Holy One from entering. Light cannot penetrate through the walls you make to block it, and it is forever unwilling to destroy what you have made. No one can see through a wall, but I can step around it. Watch your mind for the scraps of fear, or you will be unable to ask me to do so. I can help you only as our Father created us. I will love you and honor you and maintain complete respect for what you have made, but I will not uphold it unless it is true. I will never forsake you any more than God will, but I must wait as long as you choose to forsake yourself. Because I wait in love and not in impatience, you will surely ask me truly. I will come in response to a single, unequivocal call. Watch carefully and see what it is you're really asking for. Be very honest with yourself in this, for we must hide nothing from each other. If you will really try to do this, you've taken the first step toward preparing your mind for the Holy One to enter. We will prepare for this together, for once he has come, you will be ready to help me make other minds ready for him. How long will you deny him his kingdom? In your own mind, though denied by the ego, is the declaration of your release. God has given you everything. This one fact means the ego does not exist, and this makes it profoundly afraid. In the ego's language, to have and to be are different, but they are identical to the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit knows that you both have everything and are everything. Any distinction in this respect is meaningful only when the idea of getting, which implies a lack, has already been accepted. That is why we make no distinction between having the kingdom of God and being the kingdom of God. The calm being of God's kingdom, which in your sane mind is perfectly conscious, is ruthlessly banished from the part of the mind the ego rules. The ego is desperate because it opposes literally invincible odds, whether you are asleep or awake. Consider how much vigilance you have been willing to exert to protect your ego, and how little to protect your right mind. Who but the insane would undertake to believe what is not true and then protect this belief at the cost of truth? I love that. Hey, Cynthia, great to have you here. If I didn't say already, hi, Julia and Kuzume and Ernesto. Great to have you guys here today. It was interesting. I was having this conversation with a friend this past week about God and what is God and where is God. And I love this explanation of the kingdom of heaven is you, right? Because we think, well, if God is within you, then you must have taken God from out there and put him in you, right? But that's not even it, right? I mean, you are the kingdom of heaven. I think that's just such a wonderful way to state that. What do you guys think? Any thoughts about what we just read?
Yeah, we like that. We like the line 9:5. The Holy Spirit knows that you both have everything and are everything. That gave us a nice moment, you know, one of those nice moments of peace. Yeah, particularly the are everything, because that is such a wonderful antidote to fear, isn't it? To know that there's nothing separate from us. So what could there possibly be to be afraid of?
Yeah, I love that.
We also like the bottom of paragraph 3. No one who's experienced the revelation of this can ever fully believe in the ego again. Yeah, we can get frustrated sometimes at how long this process seems to be taking, when it seems to be so easy to understand. Well, yeah, it seems to be so easy to understand, and yet just seems to also, what are we trying to say? Yeah, we keep forgetting and forgetting, and then remembering again and remembering again and remembering again. And it's like, when are we going to just remember and it will be over? Although we do feel recently that we're making, we're saving a lot of time at the moment, if you like, I think, in the words that this would use. Yeah, you retain thousands of little scraps of fear. Yeah, we do. Thousands of little scraps of fear. Do we have to pick each one of them up one at a time and throw it away only for it to come back? It's like, that fear is so deeply part of our response to life, that we hardly even notice it's there so much of the time until it's not there. And then we're like, oh my goodness, we had no idea that it could, we could feel this good. And then the fear comes back. Often the fear of losing the good feeling is what comes back and takes that good feeling away. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that, Kuzume. I think what was coming to my mind as you were talking was the last part of paragraph 10, where it said, consider how much vigilance you've been willing to exert to protect your ego and how little to protect your right mind.
Yeah. I mean, the periods that we've had where we've had like real phenomenal peace is like, yeah, how kind of, there's a thing that there's several things that happens. One of the things that happens is that, we'll just be tempted by a grievance, tempted by some wanting to blame somebody for something, or withhold forgiveness or withhold love in some way, and we're tempted by that, and it happens, and then it's like, oh my goodness, no, we want to get back there, but then it's kind of too late. Well, it's not too late. That's the other thing that we're learning over time, is that it's never too late, that we can always change our mind, and it's like, yeah, just keep turning and turning and turning towards the truth and towards love and forgiveness and all the rest of it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just a constant practice, right? Constant practice of what will we choose with our 60,000 thoughts a day, love or fear? Easy, but not always
Part
simple.
of the challenge too, Terry, is out of those 60,000 thoughts to be able to discern what's true and what's not. What are you feeding? What are you feeding in your brain? And Mary and I had this discussion the other day about, or actually it was earlier, about keeping it real, especially with yourself. And be truthful with yourself. There's so many times the ego's talking louder than spirit. And so we tell spirit, oh, okay, I'll come back to you or whatever. And then we're going to forge ahead with whatever the ego is telling you or thinking, making you think, or reinforcing what you thought, what you believe to be true. And part of the undoing is picking away from some of those thoughts that became the foundation of how you felt about yourself, and being able to get to the place where you peel back those layers and you keep it real and recognize fully that out of those 60,000 thoughts that you have every single day, how many of them are true? How many of them are worthwhile in internalizing? And I think if all of us evaluated that, you'd probably find that not a whole lot were helpful to you.
Yeah. And not only that, instead of just observing them, right? Which is important to understand first, like, what am I thinking? But then after that point, to actually be vigilant and say, okay, how many of these thoughts are supporting my ego? And how many of these thoughts are really supporting my right mind and the way I want to direct my thoughts to that place of at one minute, right? So I think that's another practice is really being vigilant, and once you recognize what you're thinking, to just say, okay, stop, just stop, and reconnect with love, realign with love, and just stop those thoughts, because trying to figure them out is not helping. That's just aligning more with the ego.
I don't know how everybody else feels, but there's been a lot of times in my life that I find a lot of my thoughts and processes and everything are the things that I was taught when I was very young from other people's egos. So it's just like it's like an avalanche of other people's egos that influence the way I think about things and the way, and my turning away from certain things and turning away from other things and accepting things. So I mean, for the most part, our lives in this world are not true. Nothing out there is true. The only thing that's true is love. And so anything that isn't love is not true. So all the things that we think about ourselves, about others, about society, about everything, none of that's true. So the 60,000 thoughts that we have a day, they're not true.
I like that, Carl, that you said it's like having an avalanche of everybody else's egos. That's a great
Yeah.
because it's
Well, I think
At the time.
Don Miguel Ruiz refers to that as your early conditioning, right? Your early domestication process.
I'm dealing with my dad's egos, my brother's egos, my mother's egos, my grandparents' egos from when I was just being able, when I was just a baby, and
Yeah.
it just keeps on going, and it's all those things. That's why this is such a breath of fresh air. These kind of teachings is the realization that all the stuff that's in there is just, it's not true. The only thing that's true is love.
Yeah.
One of the things that's been happening with us recently is a sort of sudden seeing of how, pretty much what Carl's just saying, but all of the stuff that we're thinking doesn't matter. We can get hung up on thinking, worrying about what we're thinking, worrying about like yeah, how we're doing this, that, and the other. But it's like all of that, it doesn't matter. And yeah, that's so alien to the normal way of thinking in this world, isn't it? That is so insistent that you have to try to be the best person, you have to try to get it right, you know, it really matters who you are, and it doesn't matter who we are at all. It doesn't matter what this personality is at all. We're still just, in the words of the course, child of God, or yeah, and just as perfect. Yeah,
don't be
Ego's control.
it's that we don't understand, and that's the basic problem, that we learn love at an early age. If you're a good grade, you will learn love from I love you if you're a good boy, good girl. And so consequently, really understand love from the perspective that we really are love. It's a concept that we kind of stray away from when we're in that habit. Then we learn about love on if terms. And so consequently, we grow up and then we start looking at love outside of ourselves,
Because there's
not realizing
conditions
that
for
we
our
are
lovability.
with conditions, right? With conditions. And so right then and we lose that whole concept of Christ God in us, because we no longer understand love. It's a weighty concept I've been reading from Don Miguel.
Yep.
It's I don't know if you read A Return to Love, Marianne Williams. She hits on that part.
Yeah.
Very hard.
That until you are in love, that you come within you, that you are love, pretty much we're lost souls. I mean, to gather that back. Love is her book. 93, she wrote this book. I'm reading it for the first time.
Really?
Yeah.
You know who she is, I'm sure. You know she's an advocate course.
She's also a candidate.
But it's all about the love. And being able to find original love. That's it.
She's also a candidate for president.
Yes.
Yes.
Did you want to say something, Kusume?
That first line, that line from paragraph 6, no force except your own will is strong enough or worthy enough to aid you. Again, within.
Yeah.
Just thank you, Terry. Yeah, just like this feeling at the moment of like sort of parallel lives, like there's two lives going on at this moment. There's like the life of the spirit, there's the life of the ego, and they don't cross, they don't touch one another. Which is pretty much what we were reading, I think, about before we broke, before you went away, and we were confused about that. So yeah, that seems to be being clarified for us, that these two lives are happening in parallel, and yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Yeah. One is real and one is unreal, right?
Yeah.
All right. Any other thoughts before we continue? All right, let's keep going. I'm sure we'll have more shares after we read This Need Not Be. If you cannot hear the voice for God, it's because you do not choose to listen. That you do listen to the voice of your ego is demonstrated by your attitudes, your feelings, and your behavior. Yet, this is what you want. This is what you are fighting to keep, and what you are vigilant to save. Your mind is filled with schemes to save the face of your ego, and you do not seek the face of Christ. The glass in which the ego seeks to see its face is dark indeed. How can it maintain the trick of its existence except with mirrors? But where you look to find yourself is up to you. I've said that you cannot change your mind by changing your behavior. But I've also said, and many times, that you can change your mind. When your mood tells you that you have chosen wrongly, and this is so whenever you are not joyous, then no, this need not be. In every case, you have thought wrongly about some brother God created, and are perceiving images your ego makes in a darkened glass. Think honestly what you have thought that God would not have thought, and what you have not thought that God would have you think. Search sincerely for what you have done and left undone accordingly. And then change your mind to think with God's. This may seem hard to do, but it is much easier than trying to think against it. Your mind is one with God's. Denying this and thinking otherwise has held your ego together, but it has literally split your mind. As a loving brother, I am deeply concerned with your mind and urge you to follow my example as you look at yourself and at your brother and see in both the glorious creations of a glorious Father. When you are sad, know this need not be. Depression comes from a sense of being deprived of something you want and do not have. Remember that you are deprived of nothing except by your own decisions, and then decide otherwise. When you're anxious, realize that anxiety comes from the capriciousness of the ego, and know this need not be. You can be as vigilant against the ego's dictates as for them. When you feel guilty, remember that the ego has indeed violated the laws of God, but you have not. Leave the sins of the ego to me. That is what the at-one-ment is for. But until you change your mind about those whom your ego has hurt, the at-one-ment cannot release you. While you feel guilty, your ego is in command, because only the ego can experience guilt. This need not be. Watch your mind for the temptations of the ego, and do not be deceived by it. It offers you nothing. When you have given up this voluntary dispiriting, you will see how your mind can focus and rise above fatigue and heal. Yet you are not sufficiently vigilant against the demands of the ego to disengage yourself. This need not be. The habit of engaging with God and His creations is easily made if you actively refuse to let your mind slip away. The problem is not one of concentration. It is the belief that no one, including yourself, is worth consistent effort. Side with me consistently against this deception, and do not permit this shabby belief to pull you back. The disheartened are useless to themselves and to me, but only the ego can be disheartened. Have you really considered how many opportunities you have had to gladden yourself, and how many of them you have refused? There is no limit to the power of a son of God, but he can limit the expression of his power as much as he chooses. Your mind and mine can unite in shining your ego away, releasing the strength of God into everything you think and do. Do not settle for anything less than this, and refuse to accept anything but this as your goal. Watch your mind carefully for any beliefs that hinder its accomplishment, and step away from them. Judge how well you have done this by your own feelings, for this is the one right use of judgment. Judgment, like any other defense, can be used to attack or protect, to hurt or to heal. The ego should be brought to judgment and found wanting there. Without your own allegiance, protection, and love, the ego cannot exist. Let it be judged truly, and you must withdraw allegiance, protection, and love from it. You are a mirror of truth in which God himself shines in perfect light. To the ego's dark glass, you need but say, I will not look there, because I know these images are not true. Then let the Holy One shine on you in peace, knowing that this and only this must be. His mind shone on you in your creation and brought your mind into being. His mind still shines on you and must shine through you. Your ego cannot prevent him from shining on you, but it can prevent you from letting him shine through you. The first coming of Christ is merely another name for the creation, for Christ is the Son of God. The second coming of Christ means nothing more than the end of the ego's rule and the healing of the mind. I was created like you in the first, and I have called you to join with me in the second. I am in charge of the second coming, and my judgment, which is used only for protection, cannot be wrong because it never attacks. Yours may be so distorted that you believe I was mistaken in choosing you. I assure you, this is a mistake of your ego. Do not mistake it for humility. Your ego is trying to convince you that it is real, and I am not. Because if I am real, I am no more real than you are. That knowledge, and I assure you that it is knowledge, means that Christ has come into your mind and healed it. I do not attack your ego. I do work with your higher mind, the home of the Holy Spirit, whether you are asleep or awake, just as your ego does with your lower mind, which is its home. I am your vigilance in this because you are too confused to recognize your own hope. I am not mistaken. Your mind will elect to join with mine, and together we are invincible. You and your brother will yet come together in my name, and your sanity will be restored. I raise the dead by knowing that life is an eternal attribute of everything that the living God created. Why do you believe it is harder for me to inspire the dispirited or to stabilize the unstable? I do not believe that there is an order of difficulty in miracles. You do. I have called, and you will answer. I understand that miracles are natural because they are expressions of love. My calling you is as natural as your answer. and as inevitable. Well, that's very nice to know. And it ties perfectly into what we were just talking about when Kuzume was saying that there are two different things in me, right? The ego is the lower mind and the Holy Spirit is the higher one. So that's why it feels like there's two separate beings.
Yeah, and what we find reassuring is that, like, even as, you know, we go about our day and the ego's busy doing its stuff, there's also the work going on with Christ and the higher mind. That is happening alongside, even if we're not aware of it. That is also, we think, it seems to be the case, that is, yeah, in fact we know that is always something that we've talked about with one of our friends. Is like we play computer games sometimes, which can feel like a really mundane, you know, what we can, sorry, we were distracted by the chat. Yeah, it can feel like a real mundane waste of time. And yet what we find is that sometimes, while part of our mind is just occupied doing that, we're aware of other things, problems being sorted, things happening behind the scenes, kind of thing. But yeah, isn't it lovely the way that we have a discussion, and then the next bit that we read just seems to speak to that discussion so often. And we loved, your mind is filled with schemes to save the face of your ego, and you seek the face of Christ. Isn't that so true? Like, all the time. Yeah, all the time. Our mind is concerned with what we look like, how we're appearing, what other people think of us, and even when we're trying not to be, yeah. And yeah, it would be, just imagine what kind of energy would be released for us if we stopped doing all of that. Yeah, thank you.
No, that was great. And sorry for the chat disturbance. But I loved what you said about it seems like when you're playing computer games, you almost go into a state of meditation, right? Where you start getting messages, because that kind of relaxes your mind and allows the messages to come through, right?
Yeah, I guess you're not focusing on the ego's plans and stuff, because the ego's plans are very simple. You know, at that point, you're just trying to make a row or whatever.
Right.
And yeah, so its voice goes quiet. Yeah, a nice way of looking at it.
That's interesting. I love that.
I have a question.
So when you kind of
go ahead, Mary.
Go ahead, Elise. No, go ahead. You first.
I just had a quick question about the first sentence in paragraph 5. When you feel guilty, remember that the ego has succeeded in violating the laws of God, but you have not. And that you is italicized, but shouldn't that be like a capital Y? Meaning like your higher self, your inner you, that just struck me because the you that's unchanging is the you that is the divine, not the you that is your ego.
Right. Right.
So I don't know, that's not necessarily a typo, but I'm sure that's what they were inferring, the divine self in that instance.
Maybe the reason why it's not capitalized is because you're still allowing your ego to make mistakes, so therefore you're not completely without it.
Okay.
I don't know. I'm just guessing.
Okay.
But maybe that's it, but who knows? I don't know.
Okay.
It's a guess at best. But I agree with you. I think that the way you are explaining it seems to be the way it was trying to be interpreted.
Okay.
But yeah.
Well, I mean, we think that generally the course, when it uses you, it's not talking to the ego. That's our feeling. I mean, don't know if it explicitly sort of talks about it, but it doesn't. I don't know. Yeah. it talks about your ego. I mean, you actually, if you actually get the sentence, your ego, the your is not capitalized, but it can't be talking to the ego. So we think it just doesn't use capital Y for what we are. The last meeting, we were having real trouble with that. It was like a burning question for us. You know, what am I? If I'm aware of spirit and I'm aware of the ego, but I'm not either of those things because they're not aware of each other. And you know, what am I? And then I think the next lesson that we did, it was like, you are love. And it's like, okay, and it's like, we don't understand that answer, but we'll take it. You know, because like all of the kind of way our mind was trying to work and figure it out, it was like, well, we don't know, but yeah, we're love. Okay, so we're love. That's fine.
And when you recognize that that state of peace, or if you want to call it love or joy or whatever name you want to have for being, that state of being that is your higher self, that is your God self. Once you've gotten that belief, then the ego just naturally moves into its place of being. As I was saying to Alicia earlier, it's like a child that's having a tantrum because the child is overtired, doesn't know what to do with itself. So it tries to control that situation and gets crazed because it can't really. But once it feels safe and can relax, it naturally goes into that receptive state, if you will. And that's what happens with ego. We don't have to kill it, devalue it, force it out. It just naturally says, oh, I respect that self, and now I know where I belong. And now I know my role. And the higher self says, why, yes, you're a fantastic tool. I appreciate you, and I'm happy to work with you. And they actually get along. But in the beginning, to work with ego, we think from an egoic way of thinking, from a separated way of thinking, that we have to somehow destroy it in order to, quote unquote, conquer it and replace it with our higher self. But higher self would never do that. So it just flows into that natural state of being.
Which goes along with your comment, Mary, in the past that, you know, the ego is not your enemy. That was an eye opener for me because I think there was a lot of energy I was putting into trying to squash it, push it down, get it away, trying to kill the ego. But the ego is not it's not the enemy. As you said, it's a tool.
The ego loves a good battle.
Absolutely.
I do not attack your ego there, beginning of paragraph 11. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Yeah. All right. Any other conversations before we continue? And this is a perfect segue, of course, once again.
Well, if we're segueing, then we can go ahead and say something. It's not specific to what we read, but it is building. Every time we run across an example of this, you know, we've dismissed it. But now it just keeps coming back too many times. And so we're all familiar with the folks that won't go to the doctor because they're going to, you know, did not take their kid to the doctor because they're going to pray it away, and then their kid dies. And, you know, of course, it's because they didn't pray or believe enough, you know, and like that. And it just, I mean, we don't come from a Christian tradition, right? So a lot of the terms and phrases and ways of putting things are foreign to us. And this, you know, yeah, no, you could easily do this if it isn't happening. Oh, well, it's because you didn't really want it. Oh God, we thought we did. Okay. It's just like that whole, well, you didn't pray hard enough. You didn't believe enough. You don't want it enough. It just seems all the same, which is, when we hear of somebody saying, well, we're projecting this, but we assume here in this room from the way we've heard y'all talk that when somebody blames them for their child dying because they didn't believe strongly enough, most of us, we're thinking our heart sort of cringes. What a horrible message to give somebody suffering. The Course tells us we're suffering and then gives us that message on every page. Oh God, all your suffering. Well, it's your fault. We know you can't see this, but don't worry, just believe us. It's your fault. And you did this and it didn't work. Well, it's your fault again. It's just like, wow. It just sort of builds up. Anyway, feels a lot like blaming the victim over and over and over again. And yeah, anyway, any thoughts? As we said, it's not particular to this section, but it's in here as well.
I think, for me to have a thought, I probably want to get into more of a detailed conversation about specifics, only because I don't want to generalize and make assumptions. But yes, I understand, how you could definitely feel that way. And I think a lot of it's called like spiritual bypassing, right? Like, oh, if you just were more spiritual, you'd be happy. And oh, if you were just more, if you could just
yes, and you need not do anything. But
and
yeah,
you need
if
not
you
do
are
anything.
only this, yes, but you need not
Right.
do anything, but whatever.
Right. Gosh.
Yeah.
I mean, I know for myself, it was a process. I mean, definitely. Do I still struggle with it? Sure. And I think too, I mean, I can't speak again for what you're going through, but I know that I've had struggles myself with this whole thing. I remember when I first started reading A Course in Miracles, I put it down for months. I set it down and I'm like, nope. It's, trying to brainwash me. I'm not going to do it. It's, it's going to take me away from everything I know. And I've worked so hard for all of this. And it's just telling me I need to do nothing. And I'm not ready to do nothing because I've worked too hard for this life. And I've struggled and I've got, responsibilities that I need to take care of. And I'm just not going to do it. And I remember, just putting it down and not doing it. And then all of a sudden I would just randomly pick it up and read something. And for me, it was more like, okay, that feels good. Like when I'm reading the Course and it feels good to me, I just keep going. When I'm reading it and it doesn't feel good, I know that there's something's gone wrong. Kind of like what it said, that's the indication. If this feels like doesn't feel good, it's almost like the ego's now in charge and it's saying, I'm in charge now. It's interesting though, because it's not saying that a person is right or wrong for engaging with the ego. It's just saying, if you want to know if you're engaging, if you're aligning with love or aligning with fear, how do you feel? Right? If you feel anything that's like below the line of neutrality, then most likely you're definitely aligning with fear. Anything above the line of neutrality, or you can go side by side, you're aligning with love. But there's been a lot of times when my ego's been kicking and screaming and saying, I don't want to do it. I don't buy it. It's not working. And then I'll do a lesson or I'll have an experience. I think more so it's the experience, right? The knowledge in just reading the book by itself, I don't think is enough. I think the lessons and the undoing and going through the process of bringing that along with the text is where now it's like, okay, now I've got something tangible that I can see, I can experience, and I can say, okay, all right, I think that works for me.
It's like what the Buddha says, if you have, if you, you should meditate for a minute a day. And if you don't have time, then you should meditate for an hour. You know, if you don't have time, you do it more. If you don't feel like doing it, you do it anyway. And that causes the breakthrough.
Well, that whole belief in I don't have time,
Yeah.
the very thing that you need to look at. So, or that's what. And I certainly found that, you know, you can't solve the problem from the level of the problem. I just give it up to spirit to give me the experience so that I can have something to relate to. If I cannot wrap my mind around it, help me to, you know, give me the exposure to see this differently. I had that experience that you were talking about with some people who fully believed what they said, but it's an incomplete belief. And a month after my daughter was killed by a car, they pulled me aside and said, "We want to tell you why she died. And she died because you acknowledged that she was going to die, and we're talking about could you, you know, use her organs and have them, you know, continue other people to live. So you immediately said that she was gone, and therefore she was. You didn't have the belief in you. And at that time, I hadn't experienced anything at this higher vibration, so I bought into that guilt, hook, line, and sinker, and cried harder than I think I've ever brought tears and grief and sorrow in my entire life. I just kept sobbing uncontrollably to think that I, in fact, was the one who killed my child. And, you know, that's a terrible situation for there to be in. Now I see it very differently, including my definition of kill and death and all of that. But I see them as, you know, wanting to experience these higher truths, but they were stuck at their level of interpreting it, which was not, the words are on a higher plane, but their interpretation is not yet, because it didn't reflect their experiences. So I forgive them for that, putting me through hell on earth.
That's a great example, Mary. Thank you so much for sharing that.
We will go ahead and leave it with this, just, you know, so we can move on too. But we would like to say that, you know, we were not thrilled when you said that, you know, yeah, it took a little while for, you know, us for me to, you know, become comfortable with it. And that typically indicates, and the way we interpreted it was, and it was a gradual process towards this understanding, and you might still have some, but it seems for us, as we said, we were able to just brush it off pretty much at first, but it is having a cumulative effect on us, taking us, and we end up feeling further away from understanding than we were in the beginning, because now there are 94 different contexts that we don't understand, not just one, you know. So anyway, and that's getting heavy. Well, figure it out. And yeah, and we'll leave it there so we can not spend any more time on that today.
Unfortunately, we want to say something about it, which is that, okay, so it says here, yeah, when you are sad, no, this need not be. Yeah. You're deprived of nothing except by your own decisions. I mean, how many of us actually live like that? We are deprived of nothing except, oh, if we haven't got this, then we obviously, that's our own decision. And we have had a few sit down chats with God about that kind of thing, like, okay, mate, come here and explain to me, that kind of thing, which is what we've done in the past. But what the switch for us comes when we believe what is being said. And then instead of it reading as like it's your own fault, it's your release from this is in your own hands. It's empowering, and it takes us away from being a victim and gives us the responsibility for our own awakening. And yeah, if the life that we're living is really painful, which our life can, I mean, financially, God, our life's a disaster, you know. Yeah, then it's anyway, that's a bit of a red herring. But yeah, it's like where we are at the moment is we're really kind of like forcing ourselves to turn around and say, okay, well, hang on, if this is true, then we can do something. If this is true, then we actually can change, and we can have the kingdom of heaven. We can have salvation. We can be the light of the world. We can, you know, if this is true, then it's not mocking us, it's empowering us. Yeah, thank you.
That's a great share, Kuzume, and that just completely reminded me of when I finally was able to embrace this. And it wasn't when I first started doing it. As a matter of fact, I started Course in Miracles when I was pregnant with my son. And I remember being really pissed at God when I went through my third divorce. I felt like everybody had lied to me and cheated me, and the whole world was bullshit, excuse my language. I was sick and tired, and I thought, if this is all an illusion, I'm done. Like, I am not interested in the illusion. I'm out. I am not playing anymore. Like, I quit. And that's basically what my mindset was. It's like, if this is your idea of a joke of giving us an ego and making us suffer just so we can learn all this ridiculousness of painful experiences and no money, and I was broke, I had nothing, I had no money, no job, 2 kids that I was supposed to support, and I was just really pissed off and angry, and that anger turned into depression because I held on to it, and boy, was I pissed. I was so mad because I knew enough about the illusion to be pissed about the illusion. I was mad that it wasn't real. I was mad that I wasn't one with the mind of God. I was mad that it wasn't easier. Like, why does this have to be so hard? It's not fair. It's not right. It's cruel in so many ways. And I decided that I was done. And my brother had committed suicide before that, because a whole other related situations. And I thought, well, maybe he's right. Maybe I just need to get out of here. This is just not for me. It's not anything I'm interested in. And I went through a really deep, dark depression, which I wasn't going to get myself out of. It was somebody else that showed up in my life every single day to get me out of bed. And I know I shared this with you guys, but that was real, and that was hard, and it was not fun. And I was still doing Course in Miracles through it all. I was still holding my Course in Miracles weekly meetings and reading it and saying, whatever, you know, I was still angry, doing it angry, and not really, you know, reading it and listening to it. Okay, it's an illusion, sure, but it's still BS. You know, I'm not happy with the illusion. I don't want to be here. I don't want to be part of this. It's not fair. And it wasn't until I literally let go of everything, like was at that point of no attachment to anything. Like, I was ready just to check out. I was ready to say, I'm done. I'm finished with all of this. And that's when I felt that little spark of joy in my heart that hadn't been there for months. And it was so minuscule. But the fact that I hadn't felt it for months made it the only thing I could feel, because it was different. and it was warm, and it was love. And it wasn't attached to anybody or anything. It was inside of me. And that was a surprise. And from that moment, things started turning around. So, you know, I don't know if that helps to share that experience. But I don't have a really good explanation other than I just had to be at a place of nothing. I had to let go of everything in order to actually feel something. And that meant I had to let go of my anger. At that point, I wasn't even angry. I was just done. I was just tired of it. And then I felt it. So, and then things started making sense. And then I could read it and go, oh yeah, yep, that is true. Yep, I felt that. That's true for me. I can understand that better now. But up until that point, it was just words that got me mad and made me angry that, you know, why is there an ego? Why do we have to go through this? This is not fair, and it's not okay that people have to suffer. And I still don't think it's great that people have to suffer. I don't think it's okay. I don't think that just happens to be the only way I got it, was to finally get to that place of having nothing.
Yeah, we've heard it said, like, we remember complaining about this ourselves, saying, why does it have to be so painful? Why do we have to be torn apart? Why do we have to be broken and battered and beaten every time we try to get up? And we remember somebody saying to us, but it is possible to just go from a joy to a greater joy. But that's not everybody's path. Is that
right? It wasn't my path.
I would say that would be the exception to the rule, Kusama, because I think a lot of us that are seekers or on a path to try to find meaning with our lives or whatever have had sort of a bumpy road. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
You aren't wrong. The world is bullshit.
Right. Exactly.
Oh, that's bullshit, and I'm not. There you go.
Yeah, maybe that's it. Accepting that the world just is bullshit instead of be like, oh, the world's supposed to be something else. No. Yeah.
We think one of the problems that we're having is we don't have a lot of history with people. You know, we've got a couple of years with a couple of people that are really important to us, but we don't have a lot of history where, you know, we could have someone around us that would verify this. But we think one of the problems that we're having, you know, as we're talking about, and we've been thinking this a lot in this last week, you know, as we hear about, you know, why does it have to be so hard? Why do we have to be broken and stuff like this? And anybody that's known us for any length of time at all would just sit there and say, okay, this is absolutely impossible. Let's ask Angel to do it, because we won't give up. There is no give up in us ever. You know, I mean, we don't know if anybody saw Gattaca, right? But the idea of at the end where he's like, how on earth could you know, beat us? And it was like, you know, swimming out in the ocean, then swimming back. How could you go further than, oh, because I didn't save anything for the way back. You know, if I die, I die, but I am not giving up. And my God, we related to that so much. That was our whole life, right? So it's like, yeah. So anyway, it's just like, yeah, no, we understand we have to be broken, and we developed an ego that was unbreakable. So yeah, this is going to hurt a lot, you know, and thank you very much. And, you know, really appreciate the way you're showing your love through all this pain. This is awesome. Great. Thank you. So yeah, our attitude sometimes stinks on this right now, but we'll get through it. Anyway, thanks.
Yeah.
Love you, Angel. Sunny.
Yes. And thank you for sharing, because this is important conversation. I really appreciate it. And even though it's hard conversation, I think it does help when everybody shares. Is there anything anybody wants to say? Mary?
I was just going to say, and what we believe we perceive, it does not have to be that way. It's just the way we normally do it as separated egoic selves. And, you know, I like to think of the fact that a seed has a lot of pressure on it to then, you know, become that plant or whatever it becomes, because then it, gets out of the shell and then reaches for its nourishment, for the sun, for, whatever it needs. It takes it from the soil, et cetera, et cetera. But, and so we kind of live our lives out of that as well. It doesn't have to be, because in spirit, it's not. So it just depends on, typically we are doing it from an egoic self, understanding the process, and therefore we tackle it in that manner. But you don't have to.
Yeah. Thank you, Mary. Anybody else have anything they would like to share before we close?
Thanks, Terry. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. I'm always available if anybody wants to reach out to me, message, call. Great to have all of you here, and thank you again for all of your shares.
Till next week.
Appreciate it.
Wrong.
All right, we will see you next week.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Julia.